Welcome to the Samueletini Show, where business, innovation, and sustainability converge to drive progress. Are you ready to uncover solutions shaping our future? Let's dive in.
Welcome to a new episode. Today on the show, we are going to discuss something that is really important, artisanal mining. So maybe we have heard about it, but we don't know what it is. And today we are pleased to have Rob Karpati, who is a sustainability expert and a mining expert with us. Rob, it's such a pleasure to have you today here with us.
Well, thank you very much for having me on the podcast. I've been really looking forward to this conversation. I have a finance background, and I've been, and I'm right now the mining partner at the Blended Capital Group, really focused on changing what does artisanal mining look like, the dignity of work, the productivity of work, the environmental aspects. And to do that, how do we connect finance at scale into the sector so that we can drive professionalization at scale? Because at the end of the day, investors need to engage in order to fund the work, which is going to deliver commercially reasonable results as productivity goes up and as social impacts improve.
Fantastic, Rob. And before going in depth, for our audience, but also for me, can you explain us the different types of mining and why artisanal mining is so important and which is the significance within the different types?
So there's a continuum when you think about mining from the largest companies through to one-off prospectors. But basically, there's large scale and artisanal mining. So large scale, which can be huge companies like BHP or Rio Tinto or Barrick Gold, there's 7 million employees worldwide. They're in big companies, highly mechanized work, underground, formal value chains, formal businesses. Artisanal mining, on the other hand, tends to be small groups of people, one-off through to a few hundred or a few thousand. It's informal for the most part, 85% informal, surface level mining, and mining that's really not mechanized for the most part. It's by hand or by shovel, if you can imagine that, for 45 million people. And artisanal mining, for the most part, a basic challenge, which we'll be talking about, it lacks access to finance, which means it's hard for it to formalize and improve what operations look like. So as we open those doors, we're going to fundamentally reimage this sector.
Thank you so much, Rob. And artisanal mining, maybe we have read the book that was on the Financial Times Business Book of the Year, Red Cobalt, the discussion about the importance of the social part. So from your perspective, which are the significant challenges that artisanal mining, you mentioned finance and other, they are faced today, and especially in which regions?
So artisanal mining is very diverse. 45 million miners supporting 225 million people spread out over more than 80 countries. You find it across most of Africa. There's over 10 million miners in Africa. You find it in Latin America and across Asia. So most relatively underdeveloped economies have it. So the diversity of the sector is such that in some places it's legal, it's relatively formal, it's dignified work. In other places it's horrible, it's abusive, it's child labor, it's forced labor, it's very dystopic. So recognizing that variability, there's a couple of challenges that are across the board in the sector. So one is lack of access to non-predatory finance. Investors don't understand that. So because investors don't understand that, they don't tend to invest in it. And it's hard for miners to get the money they need to equip, to set up co-ops or associations that formalize, to develop capacity. So we need to do something about access to finance. That's thing number one. Narratives are a second thing. So there are false narratives that confuse artisanal mining with illegal mining a lot of the time. So illegal mining is fundamentally corrupt. It can be anything from the Wagner Group through to a drug cartel. It's bad people with guns and corruption. Artisanal mining, on the other hand, is traditional. It often extends from nearby communities. It's people who are part of the local ecosystem mining because that's their best choice or their only choice. So we need to be clear about that difference. And we need to make sure that legal frameworks, is the third thing, reflect that difference, where artisanal miners are encouraged and there's opportunities that are regulatory for them to formalize and for them to catalyze sustainable development where they're at, as stable, predictable business relationships become normal.
And thank you for the clarification that is often confused in the debate, but also in the media. And I want to dig a bit deeper in that. So you say formalization. How can formalization can impact the life of the small scale, if you say, especially here, since we are based in Africa and then we have many of artisanal miners. And then can you provide some example on how how the access to finance can leverage and improve that process?
Absolutely. So great questions. So formalization makes a night and day difference to what artisanal mining looks like. It all starts with governance at the end of the day. So fit for purpose governance through a company, a co-op, an association, which is about building capacity, which is about equipping, which is about transitioning to good practices and redesigning value chains to make predatory actors get out of it and replace them with credible, equitable actors. So really, as formalization takes hold, which both means legitimization and professionalization, it's moving miners to a place where there's stable, predictable, equitable business practices that are the ground for growth, the ground for stability, the ground for fair outcomes. So the dignity of work improves, the productivity of work improves. You've got folks mining by hand and by shovel today. That's not productive, obviously. It's incredibly hard. It's potentially abusive. So it's not dignified. So when you equip them, when you train them up, when you shift them to good practices, there's a step change on what productivity looks like. Poverty gets alleviated, safety gets improved, dignity gets improved. So, of course, the work needs to be funded, and of course, the funding needs to be commercially realistic. So investors need to understand what they're investing in, and they need to understand what return structures look like. Historically, this hasn't happened. Investors don't understand it. Imagine an investor in London or New York or Toronto or anywhere else trying to invest in artisanal mining. They don't have a clue. It's far away. There's a whole lot of risks and a whole lot of red flags. Is there child labor? Is there corruption? Is there this or that? So there needs to be a transparent environment which is easy for them to engage in, where there can be a common language between investors and miners. So in order to facilitate investment take-up. That hasn't existed in the past, and that's precisely what we're talking about and working on as the Blended Capital Group, where I'm a partner, and as partner organizations we're working with, like the Alliance for Responsible Mining and the Capitals Coalition, stand up a digital marketplace, which is going to open the door to visibility. It's going to open the door to interaction. It's going to be an opportunity for investors to invest, whether they care about the economic side, the social side, or the environmental side, which all need to come together at the end of the day.
Thank you, Rob. Incredibly interesting. And I want to go a bit deeper on that. So you say how we can ensure financial viability for responsible, let's say, artisanal mining. So we know it's challenging. You pointed out that somebody in London sitting, or maybe in Canada, we're sitting where you are, or other, so it does not understand, maybe as concerned of child labor. So how can the sustainability, the social product, the improvement can coexist with the profitability for investors, making a win-win process for the miners and for the investor? And if you can give us some example of the work that you have given that you are doing.
Yeah. So first things first. You need to make it easy for investors to understand what they're getting into. Today, if an investor wants to invest in artisanal mining, what are they buying? Everything and nothing at the same time. There's all sorts of risks, all sorts of uncertainties they don't understand. So the approach we're taking is gonna bifurcate investments, split it up into a series of a few dozen asset classes. So an asset class, think about it as a tangible area of value where an investor can engage. It can be, I want to make money and I want to produce more copper supply. It can be, I want to eliminate child labor or improve gender equity or safety. It can be biodiversity and reforestation, which is what I want to focus on. So when you think about it, all of a sudden, different types of investors are going to be able to invest in projects based on their specific focus areas of interest. So what ends up happening, different investors will be combined into what we call blended capital stacks, meaning groups of investors investing in a single project to drive outcome shifts. So why do you need to do it that way? Well, different investors care about different things is one side of it. But the other side of it, the reality on the ground, you don't improve one area in isolation. You build capacity, you build governance, you equip, you train, you transition better practices. So that comes together with better outcomes on poverty, on safety, on dignified work, on all of these different things, along with more money and better ecological outcomes. There are standards that talk about some of this: fair mind, craft code, forest smart mining. And some of our partners, like the Alliance for Responsible Mining and collaborators like 11 Sources, this is what they've done for many years. And they've done it in a lot of different countries and a lot of different environments where they've engaged miners and driven outcome shifts as professionalization through standards-based approaches took place. So opening the door to at-scale finance for that is going to open the door for at-scale professionalization, which at the end of the day is where we want to and need to go.
Thank you, Rob. And on that, some people maybe they can they think on the back of on their mind. Yes, but how do we ensure transparency? We are far away sometimes. Artisanal mining happens in Congo, in other areas. So, when you were discussing, for me, three things came out. The governance, the transparency, and to avoid the exploitation and the loopholes are maybe some issues that in the debate of the artisanal mining. How you are ensuring to address these challenges?
Validation. So at the end of the day, if you're an investor, you're not going to trust what's happening 5,000 miles away in a place where there are deep social and economic challenges. So you need to have validation processes in place. Be able to eyeball, here's what's being promised, here's what's being delivered. It's consistent what's being delivered with what's being promised. So partners and collaborators of ours, like the Alliance for Responsible Mining, like 11 Sources, and some others, that validation is part of what they do. The second thing is the act of taking investment opportunities and splitting it up into these asset classes. So into the social components, environmental, economic, and financial components. Right there, that increases transparency because it highlights what are the specific opportunities for a specific project or group of projects. Instead of in the past, you're investing in a project and there wasn't necessarily that visibility of here's the areas that you're improving in the specific detailed opportunities.
And you touch the right word, validation and work. And usually it's a recurring theme of our podcast, the role of technology, especially to enhance transparency and work. How do you see the digital technologies, innovative business model, and other new framework that are growing? How they can help this process of formalization, responsible formalization of artisanal mining?
So technology is one of the central things. How can you take a whole bunch of investors and a whole bunch of projects and put them together and with investors and focused on different asset classes without AI-based technology and blockchain-based technology? You can't. So one thing, blockchain, which is it's the stability and trust that what you're starting with is what you're ending up with. And AI that can that can combine different kind of investors for different kinds of projects. So the environment that we're standing up is exactly that. Along with that, traceability of product from miner to refiner so that you can long-term sustain gains and have a control mechanism to ensure that miners are living to what you thought they're living to. That's blockchain driven and all the various disciplines associated with that. So technology is central to the business model in a very real way.
And thank you. And it's really good to see how technology can enhance transparency and also ensure at least traceability of the raw materials, especially critical raw material for some of the gadgets that we need also for the sustainability transformation. I want to touch a bit on the social aspect. We know that you're working in difficult areas. You work also with the remote community, often marginalized. So based on the experience and the work that you are doing, how you tackle the collaboration, how you ensure the collaboration with the local community and to be also to bring at the grassroots level, the impact that is needed to improve their livelihoods.
So the sector is diverse. 80 different countries, 45 million people. Social realities differ place to place. But what's consistent everywhere is the miner needs to be central to the work. The miner needs to be central to the solution, to leading the solution, to leading the ongoing work. Along with the miner, that means the community by definition. So the notion of a flexible framework, which means engaging folks based on their own realities, driving to a solution that makes local sense, and implementing that solution in a way that develops local capacity and local leadership has to be central to the work, because otherwise, what do you have? It's locals who live there. Anyone else who's there is a guest of the locals. And the miners tend to be an extension of local communities. So talking to one is talking to other. So as you do that and you think about flexible frameworks, there's other key stakeholders. Artisanal miners often cohabit land with large-scale mining companies. They share the land concession. So you want to be able to engage the large-scale mine company and collaborate. It's good for the large-scale mining company once you've explained it to them, because you're flipping conflict risk into collaborative productivity. You're lowering legal risks. You're lowering PR risks. You're lowering value chain risks. So you want to collaborate with them. And of course, there's whatever government where you're at. So you want to be able to collaborate with local government and broader country level government where it makes sense, because you want to make sure that legal frameworks are appropriate for driving sustainable development based on standing up stable, predictable, equitable business relationships with ASM. So stakeholders, by definition, are at the very heart of the work. It's not someone far away who's here to help. It's listening and respecting and engaging the community and the miners, and then everyone, the broader ecosystem around the community and the miners, towards solutions that make sense to everyone.
And thank you, Rob. And I want to go a bit to get a forward looking. Now you have seen you are working with several actors and stakeholders to really transform the sector, to put what you said, responsible artisanal mining. So looking at how do you see this sector evolving and which role do you see for the artisanal mining can play, especially in the global sustainability efforts that we know that requires a lot to mine a lot of critical materials from our
mining as a whole has a generational opportunity right now. We need more critical minerals. We need a lot more critical minerals. For instance, we need to mine as much copper in the next 50 years as we have in the last 5,000 years. It's not going to happen unless things change, unless we do things differently. So large-scale mining is changing. There's AI, there's robotics, there's communities, there's all sorts of different changes that are in play. There's blended finance. There's really thinking about it in a long-term different way. So that's context. Then you think about artisanal miners in particular. A lot of the time they share land with large-scale miners. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But the sector is strategic. There's 45 million people, and they produce critical minerals, copper, cobalt, lithium, rare earths, and so on. They also produce precious metals and stones. So gold is the biggest piece, let's say. And all of these things, we need to produce more, and you've got folks who are mining by hand. So notionally, the sector is strategic. It's an opportunity to increase productivity if you think about it at a macro level. But you're not going to do that unless there's the appropriate formalization in play, the appropriate governance in play, and hand in hand, the social and environmental outcomes that come with that. If it's abusive, then by definition, it's lower productivity compared to if it's formal and governed and collaborative. So that's the reality. So as you think about all of that, standards are going to matter, and standards around ASM formalization and professionalization itself, but also standards around how do large-scale miners and artisanal miners interact. What does collaboration look like? So that's going to evolve, and that is evolving. And there's important work around standards development, both for LSM, ASM, and the investor side of the house in progress. Along with that, money makes the world go around. So engaging investors in a way that increases visibility is easy to use for investors, because if investors have barriers to entry, they're not going to enter. Guess what? And builds trust and transparency. So the digital marketplace we're working on is one element of that. There's non-traditional investors now focusing on mining that weren't before. Bill Gates has invested in mining. Car companies are investing in mining. Impact investors are investing in mining because there's impact opportunities, social and environmental. So the notion of blended finance, which is combining different investors together towards common goals and common value, it's here, it's growing, and it's going to be growing for many years. But at the end of the day, collaboration and trust are the ultimate drivers that are going to formalize the sector, that are going to deliver different outcomes on the dignity of work and the productivity of work through the sector, which also means the environmental touch of the sector.
And thank you, Rob. And I want to ask if you can share. If you have non-disclosure on other. Can you mention several times this new tool, this digital marketplace that you are building? Can you share with us a bit how do you envisage it to work?
Of course. So we need an environment where trust, timeliness, and transparency are all normal. Makes it easy for investors, makes it easy for different kinds of investors. So there's a marketplace with these things called asset classes. An asset class is a discrete area of value. There are going to be a few dozen of them. They're financial, social, environmental, and economic. Everything ranging from child labor elimination to improved gender equity, improved poverty alleviation, reforestation, more copper supply, biodiversity protection, sustainable development. The list goes on. There's a few dozen of them. So what those are the basis of a common language between miners and investors. So it'll be the basis for miners to join the marketplace, lay out their projects, their specific details, which we're going to validate, and for investors to engage in and participate in based on their specific interests. So the notion of democratizing access to capital is core to it. We're going to invite different groups of investors to participate, impact value, different kinds of impact, different parts of the world. And it's going to be the investor networks of obviously the Blended Capital Group, because that's where I am, but also our partners like the Capital Coalition and so on. We're going to have folks doing the work in engaging miners who do validation, who enable traceability, who enable a full trust-based environment. And it's folks who have done this. Organizations like that, for instance, the Alliance for Responsible Mining, 11 Sources, Peace Gold, some others, depending on the specifics of the detail. But the bottom line is trust, timeliness, and transparency. The scope Artisanal mining is, of course, central to the scope of this digital marketplace, but it's also going to include associated infrastructure. For instance, you need power to be able to mine, so modular solar power for places that aren't on the grid. You may think about modular refining as a mechanism for local beneficiation. So all that kind of things. You may think about small or medium scale LSMs that are responsible and sustainability oriented, because there's a continuum from ASM all the way up to the Barracks and BHPs of the world. So with that scope, with a blockchain-based environment, with asset classes as a common language, it's about initiating the dialogue and opening the door for money to fund the right work.
And thank you, Rob. And usually, we have discussed this with other guests. Usually, these one are instruments that I suppose are not for individuals or people, but are more for capital, because the risk involved would be quite high, no? Isn't it?
So there's always risk.
Yeah.
But we're thinking about that. So one aspect of risk is diversified portfolios. So it's one thing to say there's one project in one location for one commodity. It's another thing saying an investor can participate in 10 or 100 projects in different places with different commodities. So right there, diversification blends risks, it lowers risk. The second thing is validation. So the act of validation is about ensuring that there's common understanding on both the realities, the opportunities, the progress, and the risks. Because you keep your eye on the ball of what's really happening locally. And as you keep your eye on the ball, being able to manage against that. And the third part is through some organizations that I won't mention, being able to hedge some of the risks and hedge maybe 50% of the risks, so that you change the risk return proposition more fundamentally, even as you shift it through diversification and validation.
Thank you, Rob. And let me ask, as we are approaching the end of the episode, I want to ask a question. Usually we get asked, "Oh, fantastic! You are bringing change maker. You are discussing very high." But what we can do at the let's say as consumers, maybe even individual, or maybe for sure company and others. So how we can ensure as the people to ensure better and more responsible and make the choices towards empowering maybe responsible mining?
So it is a choice, and the choice starts with awareness from a consumer perspective. So number one, what is artisanal mining? It's not illegal. It's not corrupt. It's people trying to make the best choice for themselves and increase their dignity of work. So understanding and being able to focus on the right narratives is fundamental. So once that's in play, consumers are the people who ultimately spend money, and we all want responsibility inside. We want responsibility in the products that we make, that we buy and that we consume. And we think about that in different ways. So some people talk about non-GMO. Some people talk about clothes that are made locally. Some people talk about different things, but the minerals that are in our product, being able to talk to the companies that we buy from and paying for it to enable responsibility. So at the end of the day, if consumers demand responsibility, companies will provide responsibility, and it goes all the way up to the value chain. It's not necessarily going to cost people more money because you professionalize, you increase productivity as well as dignity. There's an opportunity there that's financial, but the opportunity is inconsistent. We all know that. Invisibility today is inconsistent. We all know that. But when consumers demand something, it happens because money talks.
And thank you so much, Rob, for this wonderful idea. So insightful and such a challenging task that you have had, but I think it can change many lives and can really impact many people. As you say, more than 45 million people into this, in the planet. So Thank you so much, Rob, it's been an honor and pleasure having you today.
Thank you very much. I really appreciated the opportunity, and I hope folks find it both interesting and insightful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you satisfied after this wonderful episode? Let's continue together our sustainability journey.